All right, good evening. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is session number 15 of our discussion of Sir Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur. Thanks for joining us. So, Zach was just teasing me so that he didn't expect me to start class until the end of the inning. Let me. People who are here last night already know what I'm going to be talking about, and my apologies for those of you who are totally outside this particular loop. But I am a big baseball fan. It's one of my favorite things, and I live in New England. I've been a Red Sox fan since 1985. So the Red Sox are in the World Series this week. So I have to tell you, this was tricky. This was tricky. I deliberated as to whether or not I could go through with having class while the World Series was happening. And I decided in the end that I would compromise with myself. And this was my compromise, that I would go ahead and hold class yesterday and today during games 1 and 2. But if the series were to go 6 or 7, I'm not going to do that. So, should the series go to 7 games, I will cancel class next week, and then we're not going to do class during Game 7. However, but we're going to have class tonight. I can't promise to be wholly undistracted at all times, but I did reasonably well last night maintaining class despite the fact that the Red Sox are in the World Series. So my apologies for that. Zach says I'm sharing the screen with the game. That's good, Zach. It's actually kind of very nice and vicarious for me to know that on your screen, the World Series game and I are both there in the same space. That's good. Yeah, Tarlonio is asking, does a love of baseball indicate which of the 3 estates you belong to? This is an excellent question, actually, and I don't. I'm not sure exactly which one it would correlate with. I think it's I don't know. It might be a second estate thing, possibly a first estate thing. I feel like American football is really the sort of the third estate sport. But I don't know. Basketball might be more second estate. It's a great question, Tarlonio. I'm not really sure. But anyway, the Battatores. Exactly. Torah stroke. That's it. So, okay. Anyway, to just bear with me, there is a small and non-zero chance that I might get excited in a way that is not going to make sense to a lot of you at some point during class. Like as I speak right now, of course, the Red Sox are at bat with the bases loaded and 2 outs in the bottom of the 5th. So, I'm sorry. But anyway, depending on what Steve Pierce does here, there might be exclamations, which will still be family friendly. That's the story here. So, okay. That aside, 2 other quick announcements. First, I just wanted, of course, to mention it is LA Moot in a matter of days. The day after tomorrow, I will be on an airplane flying out to Los Angeles. So looking forward to connecting with people down there in Southern California. I hope that if you're around, you'll be able to come join us. If you are free if you're in Southern California and are free this Saturday, please do feel free to come and join us. You still can even now register. Go to lamoot.org or to signumuniversity.org. Scroll down a little bit to events, and you can still register, as I say. Also, in 2.5 weeks from now, we have Magnolia Moot down in North Carolina for our friends down south. So Charlotte, North Carolina is where we'll be on November 10th. So you can come and join us for there. And actually, if you want to pitch something, if you want to be on a panel or give a presentation, I think they even extended the opportunity to make proposals for that too. So you can still you can still send a proposal to that. So anyhow, that's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, man. All right, Brian, if you're watching the game afterwards, that is super dedicated, and I will try not to spoil it for you. So I'm going to say nothing about what just happened at all. No comments about that. For Brian's sake. Because, Brian, I totally know how that is. I totally know. There have been several times, for instance, when I have been like recording something to watch afterwards, and like, in like the last 5 minutes of class, someone will make a reference to something which spoils the outcome. And I'm like, oh man, I was so close. Anyway, so, yes. Exactly. Yeah. It's Tarlonio. It is a little tricky to, think about, applying some of the Malory combat sequences to in a baseball context. Yes, hopefully there will be no point in this evening's game where the announcers feel compelled to use the word brain pan. Let's hope that just doesn't arise. My second announcement before we get started here tonight is that I wanted to remind you, I announced this last week, but just wanted to remind you through today's the day, I believe, the anniversary of the death of Chaucer. We don't know the date of his birth, so the only date we have to celebrate is his death day. And so today is the death day of Chaucer, and so we are celebrating Chaucer's death day by offering a special on the Anytime Audit enrollment for the Chaucer 2 class, the Canterbury Tales class. So that's only $75 tuition between now and the end of the month, now and the 31st. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, again, just go to signumuniversity.org, and there's a big link to it right there at the top of the page. So that was such a fun class, and if your interest in Middle English has been at all piqued by Malory, Chaucer's kind of like the real deal. Not that Malory isn't real, right? Malory's Middle English is totally legit, but it's much more like modern English, right? So Chaucer's is sort of a step back further, back up the philological chain, and is Chaucer, of course, is such a delight. Delight is really the word that I always use for Chaucer. I don't know any author who is more purely fun to read and who seems to be having more fun writing than Chaucer. Anyway, really lovely. Yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, it would be a great Christmas gift, Karita. That is absolutely true. And you can do that, by the way. Yeah, you can if you want to give the gift of a course to others. That's we have a thing for that. So just go to the link, and you can it'll ask you at the beginning if you're getting the course for yourself, if you're wanting to purchase it for a gift. So yeah, you would be the coolest and like most hardcore geekiest Secret Santa ever, right? To give the gift of the Canterbury Tales to somebody. So anyway, yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Tarlonial says, what day did King Arthur die? So we can get those courses at a discount. Yeah, Tarlonial. So actually, funny story about that. So I was listening to the audio recording of this, in the Audible version that we talked about at the beginning of class. So I'm listening to that in the car when I was going to pick up my son Matthias. Matthias gets in the car and he looks, and of course I have Audible on my like little CarPlay display, my Apple CarPlay display, and so it lists like I don't know what 12 hours out of 36 or something like that. And he's like, so that means the death of Arthur, right? And I said, yeah. And he says, it took him 36 solid hours to die. And I'm like, well, it's a little more complicated than that. Anyway, okay. With that, let us get back to the highly serious business of Sir Tristram. Now, of course, it's not exactly Sir Tristram that we're getting to yet. We got to finish up Sir Gareth, and then we'll get to Sir Tristram, who is really quite something different. had a few alternative. I had a few remarks to say about our alternative hero, our alternative knight, Sir Tristram. But let me wait till we finish up Sir Gareth first. So you'll recall, last time we had the really fun amorous hijinks of Sir Gareth and Dame Lyonesse, who do, of course, then get married, right? So Lionette, the sister, who's like, we're not told this explicitly, but must be the older sister, you'd think, right? At least she acts like it. And who, the person who can reassemble the heads of knights that have had their heads minced, are... Anyway, she succeeds in preserving their chastity against their will, right? So that they, in fact, make it to their wedding night, both virgins still, it seems, which I guess is a relief for everybody involved. The fact that they end happily ever after in marriage is actually kind of interesting. And another sort of example of, or sort of a step in the the Sir Lancelotification of the sort of the morality of the knights of Arthur's court, right? But anyway, let's add Zach. The Book of Sir Gareth is really it's pretty special. These two books that we're just finishing now, the Book of Sir Lancelot and the Book of Sir Gareth. I mean, it's really hard to top those. As I said at the end, the last two books, the Book of Lancelot and Guinevere and the Book of the Most Piteous Death of King Arthur, are the greatest. I mean, those are really the absolute best parts of the story, where Malory is writing at really his highest level. But it's really hard to surpass these books in the middle for just pure fun, I think. Yeah. Okay. So let's get. So as I say, we had a bunch of jousting. I left out many of the tournament, or sort of much of the tournament action there, except of course to say that Sir Gareth did really well. But first we have this ring business. Remember, it's just been revealed that they all live in the Isle of Avalon. This has all been taking place in the Isle of Avalon. So maybe, in retrospect, chopping up a dude's head up into 100 pieces and then having them reassembled might be less weird than it seemed at first, perhaps. Then Dame Lyonesse sighed unto Sir Gareth, Sir, I wold leave you with a ring of mine, but I wold pray you, as ye love me heartily, let me have it again when the tournament is done. For that ring increaseth my beauty, much more than it is of myself. And the virtue of my ring is this, that is green will turn to red, and that is red will turn in likeness to green, and that is blue will turn to wheat, and that is wheat will turn in likeness to blue, and so it will do for all manner of colours. Also, who that beareth this ring shall lose no blood. I love that. P.S. It will also prevent you from bleeding at all. I mean, like, obviously, the sartorial effects of, the changing color is the primary function of the ring. In addition, it will also ensure that you don't die, right? So, as a side effect. And for great love, and if you do bleed, it would be green, which would frankly be weird, right? And for great love, I will give you this ring. Or rather, shouldn't she say, I shall lend you this ring? So the ring is, Bruce, there's a certain connection to Excalibur's scabbard, right? Which again, Bruce, as soon as we learn, right, that this is all happening in Avalon, again, that seems kind of less surprising, right? Tarlonio, when she's wearing the ring, I don't know what color she normally is, right? I don't really understand, and what like the chromatic effect has to her beauty exactly. I'm not really. I'm not really. I don't really get the ring all that much. And yeah, it doesn't seem. I mean, again, Karita, apart from the rider at the end, right? Oh, and P.S. it'll prevent you from dying. But before that, like it is true. I too, Karita, have never really said to myself, what I would really, really like is a ring that will like change the color of stuff that I'm wearing randomly. But of course, this is a ring which is very specifically calculated to serve Gareth's desire. His reaction is priceless. Like, he's like, oh, that's just what I need, right? Because what I want more than anything else is to remain concealed and to prevent me being recognized. And this will certainly prevent me being recognized, right? Because I can it's not just that he will be a strange color. He'll be like shifting colors, right? So no one will be able to tell who I am. So yeah, as Tarwanio points out, it's like a reverse mood ring, right? Instead of you turning the ring colors, it turns you different colors. That's exactly it. The magic ring, which, as I say, it serves his ends, right? And honestly, I kind of wonder, it's so perfect for him here, right? That it almost seems like it's been, it is, she's giving him this ring for her great love, right? Like it's been whipped up for him on the spot. In any case, it's certainly meant to be, right? Why is Gareth's focus on being unrecognized, right, on not being known, is understandable at first once we get the context, right? That is, remember Kay's initial theory about Beaumains and that he was really a peasant just pretending, and that he wasn't truly a knight, was plausible under the circumstances, because most of the time, as we can see, all knights want to increase their worship, right? That's a standard rule. Everybody wants to be known for the good things that they do. So Gareth's obsession about concealing his name, concealing his identity, nobody guessing who he could possibly be or where he came from, is odd. It's countercultural, right? We talked last week about how it seems to be kind of a fourth son thing, right? Like he really wants to prove himself on his own and not just be coming in on the coattails of his older brother, or of course, most importantly, his super famous uncle. He is not going to be merely the beneficiary of nepotism. He is going to be, he's going to establish his name on his own. But the thing is, he's done that, right? Mission accomplished. That is all set. Why is he still so obsessed about differentiating himself? And my theory about that is what we begin to see, especially towards the very end of the story. In order to try to answer that question, that is, why is he still so upset? I mean, the secret's out, right? Everybody knows who he is now, and he's already proven himself. I mean, the whole chromatic brotherhood and the Red Knight of the Red Lawns, like, he's done the stuff. He has established himself as, and we had that clearly. Remember the whole leaderboard thing, right, with Sir Person to Vind. I mean, as he said, if you go on and beat the Red Knight of the Red Lawns, then this is gonna, you're gonna establish yourself as at least the fourth best knight in the world, right? So if he's known at this tournament, it's not going to, there's no way that's going to decrease his worship or lead anybody to question him being a proved knight, as he said. So what's the point? What's the effect of him concealing who he is? And my answer to that is that he wants to measure himself against Arthur's knights specifically. We see what happens, right? Later on, when he's fighting Sir Gawain, and neither he nor Sir Gawain know who each other is, right? And Lionette again comes in and intervenes and tells Sir Gawain that he's fighting Gareth. And what happens? As soon as he does, Sir Gawain throws down his sword and shield and refuses to fight anymore, right? Oh, my brother, why didn't you tell me that it was you, right? Gareth wants to be the stranger interloper knight at this tournament in particular, so that he can make the final step and measure himself against all the other knights of Arthur's court, who will, and it would be awkward to do that, or even just impossible. Like they might avoid him on the field. There are a bunch of reasons why, right? I mean, first of all, this is Arthur's nephew. Who wants to be the one who knocks Arthur's nephew's block off, right? I mean, oh, it's Arthur's young nephew. Let me take him right down, right? That'll, I'm sure, endear me to everybody. And not to mention his older brother. And nobody really wants to get on the bad side of Sir Gawain. So, anyway, there's I think, but again, if he's a stranger knight, and if nobody knows who he is, then he will have the freedom of the field. Everyone will fight him, and there won't be any restrictions, there won't be any hesitations, and that seems to be what he wants. And that, I think, makes a certain amount of sense, actually. Karita likes how casually the dwarf rats him out. Yeah, his dwarf undermines him, right? Clearly, because his dwarf is tired of this whole secrecy thing. Not for himself, right? His dwarf seems to be more sort of eager for the worship of his knight, you know, for the worship of Gareth than Gareth himself is, right? So the dwarf kind of fixes it so that everybody figures out who he is, right? And Gareth is kind of mad about that, but the dwarf is kind of unrepentant about that, right? He kind of wanted everybody to know, because he's worried that Gareth isn't winning enough reputation. I think Gareth is a little more willing to play the long game. Like, he knows how this is going to pay. Sooner or later, it's going to come out who that strange knight was. And once it does, he's going to receive plenty of worship. The dwarf, not willing to wait on that, right? An interesting moment is when Arthur and Lancelot have this exchange during the tournament. So Gareth, in disguise as the party-colored knight or whatever he is riding around the field, and he's knocking everybody off their horses, and King Arthur enters. "So God me help," said King Arthur, "that Sam Knecht with the many colours is a good knecht. Wherefore the king called unto him Sir Launcelot, and prayed him to encounter with that knecht. Sir, sighed Sir Launcelot, I may well find in mine heart for to forbear him as at this time, for he hath had travail enow this day. And when a good knecht doth so well upon some day, it is no good knecht's part to let him of his worship. And normally, when he saith a good knecht hath done so great labour, for peradventure, said Sir Launcelot, his quarrel is here this day, and peradventure he is best beloved with this laddie of all that been here. For I see well he pineth him, and enforceth him to do great deeds. And therefore, said Sir Launcelot, as for me, this day he shall have the honour, though it lie in my power to put him from it, yet wold I not. So, two things here. Of course, we know that Sir Lancelot is the one knight that Sir Gareth wouldn't want to fight against. He's like Sir Lancelot's biggest fan, right? They had their, let me earn your respect combat right at the beginning, right before he was knighted. But Sir Gareth is not going to want to fight on the opposite side of Sir Lancelot, right? So, interestingly, all the knights of Arthur's, almost all of them, right? Gareth positions himself against them, but he doesn't have to face Lancelot because of Lancelot's courtesy. Now, Charlonia wants to know why using a magic ring doesn't count as cheating. Well, the whole, it will prevent you from bleeding to death thing is, might seem like an unfair advantage. And of course, in some ways it would be. But remember, this is just a tournament. This is not battle. So, it's not like a combat to the death. So, hopefully, in theory, ideally, you're not receiving mortal wounds at which from which you're going to be in danger of bleeding to death during a tournament. I mean, it happens, right? I mean, you're still riding at people very hard and jabbing them with pointy sticks. So, accidents happen, but that's not the point, right? So he doesn't have an unfair advantage in anything that really sort of appertains to the tournament itself, really. But anyway, okay. Yeah, exactly. As David Urbach says, its job is really just to mask his identity, which is not not cheating. Brian Dimmick is wondering about a parallel between Gareth and Joseph from Genesis. I can see a little bit. Youngest son thing. I mean, not quite the youngest son in Joseph's case, but, you know, definitely younger son thing. There are some parallels. We don't have the same daddy issues, of course. He's proving himself in a foreign country, though in very different kinds of circumstances. More about proving himself and less about serving as the instrument. The parallel doesn't seem to me super tight, but I can see that. Though, Brian, stay tuned for a much tighter biblical parallel, I think, that we'll encounter later on in tonight's class. Anyway, okay. What I really want to emphasize here, this is a lovely, and this is going to be really important. This is a super important paragraph. Lancelot's speech here is super important because, brace yourself, we are going to be reading our way through many tournaments in the next couple hundred pages. The Book of Sir Tristram, that big fat rambling book in the middle of Le Morte Arthur, is full of tournaments in which Malory has an almost unflagging interest, right? And this is one of the challenges I know that a lot of modern readers face when reading Malory unabridged, is the tournament bits in the middle where they're like, okay, like how many times can you read about somebody rashing somebody else to the earth, and you know, and without kind of having your eyes cross. I get that. This is an important kind of key, right? Remember this, because what you need to pay attention to, there's a lot of elements of the story, right? It's kind of like, well, it's, in its way, it's like sports. Here I am with the World Series on, right? It's like sports. If somebody who is completely unfamiliar with a particular sport is watching, right, with somebody who is a great fan, and there's a great play that happens, right? You know, the experienced person is like, oh, wow, that was amazing. And the other person's like, what happened exactly? Like, I don't understand. I saw the thing, but I don't really understand why that was amazing. Or worse, if somebody does something really bad, right? And you know, and like does something really wrong. You know, of course, baseball is full of examples like that, of, you know, unbroken rules that are unwritten rules, rather, that are broken, right? Which make baseball fans really upset, and other people are like, what on earth are people even talking about? We get kind of a key to the code here, a bunch of the code here. Lancelot, again, is an exemplar of courtesy from knight to knight. And watch, because what Lancelot does here, we're going to see several knights fail to do, and others get upset, and like exactly why they're upset might seem puzzling, perhaps, in some ways. Lancelot will help us to understand. Okay, so Arthur says, why don't you go out after that knight, because he's doing great, right? And I'd love to see a match against him. Now, I don't, you know, on the one hand, Arthur has a kind of a rooting interest, right? He is the chief. There are two sides, right? That's how these tournaments work. You've got the one side and the other, so it's like fake war, right? So you've got the captain of the one side and the captain of the other side. Arthur's a team captain here, right? So he's got like the all pro on the bench, and he's like, could you get out there, right? Because we're losing, right? This guy on the other side is beating everybody. You know, I've got my ace in the hole over here. I want to, I'm gonna call in my closer, and we can still pull this out, right? So Arthur is thinking like a team captain here. Lancelot is thinking like a courteous knight, right? And he says, no, I do not want to go in and fight this guy. And these are the reasons why. He gives lots of reasons, and they're really, really interesting. Okay, first, I may well find it in my heart to forbear him as at this time, for he hath had travail enow this day. So the first thing, dude, this guy has been out there all day long, right? He has fought dozens and dozens of, and I've been sitting around, right? So I'm fresh. I'm complete. You know, I'm broken a sweat all day long, and he's at the. It's not a fair fight, right? I mean, so for me to kind of measure myself against him, or to let him measure himself against me, like, it wouldn't be right, right? You know, we can do that, but we should do that under different and better circumstances. So that's the number one thing. Thinking about not wanting to take unfair advantage. So that's one principle we already see in Lancelot's first sentence there, right? Second, and when a good knight doth so well upon some die, it is no good knight's part to let him of his worship. And namely, when he saith a good knight hath done so great labor. So when you see, when a good knight doth so well, it's not a good knight's part to let him, to deprive him, to decrease his worship, right? So who am I to come in? I mean, it would be unkind of me. This is his day, right? He has proven himself. He has beaten everybody on the field this day. For me to come in at the last minute and take him down, right? Notice Lancelot has no doubts that he could take him down, right? This is not really, there's no at all, no self-doubt in Lancelot's words here, right? Quite the contrary. He's sure he would take this guy down if they fought, right? But he says, look, if I took him down, that would be really rude, right? That would be super rude. This is his day. Why should I deprive him of his day? Like, let him have his day, right? Obviously, this is the day when he is establishing worship, and it would just be churlish of me to come in and wreck his day there at the last second. And nominally, when he saith a good knight hath done so great labor, right? Especially again at the very end when he's all tired and I'm fresh again. That would just make it doubly bad, right? Now, Lancelot is speculating about motivations, right? For peradventure, maybe his quarrel is here this day. This is Lancelot thinking through the possible consequences. Here are the bad things that could happen inadvertently, right? For this guy, if I were to come in and unseat him. It's not only just a matter of letting him of his worship, right? Like, this guy deserves to be celebrated this day. He totally has earned his victory lap today. It would just be rude of me to come and deprive him of that at the last second. But it's not just that. There might be worse consequences to that. Maybe his quarrel is here this day. Maybe he is here righting a wrong, or there is some reason he has taken a quarrel on himself and he's proving something. There is something that's actually being accomplished by his jousting here today, right? And he's accomplished it. And then I come in and wreck it at the last second in an unfair conflict. That would be horrible, right? Perhaps I might, in doing so, not only would I be rude, I could be contributing to injustice, right? I could be defrauding, in a sense, somebody, right? Whose cause has been rightly proven by how well this knight has acted today, right? He's proven his point. Let it stand, right? Or similarly, right? Peradventure, he is best beloved with his lady of all that been here, right? Maybe he's proving himself to his lady. Maybe, he has a lady and his lady has been all like, I will return your love if you prove yourself at this tournament today. Lancelot's like, dude, right? I mean, I'm not gonna, that would be awful. Because look, again, he's won, right? He's done it. He's succeeded. This is not just like I'm gonna throw it so that he can win or anything like that. It's like, he's already won it. He's proven his point. So again, it would be wrong, right? Again, he would be wrong-footing this guy with his lady, and like, why would you do that, right? What are the odds of, what are the rewards of that? For I see well he pineth him and enforceth him to do great deeds, right? Lancelot, again, nobody knows the jousting sport more than he does, right? He can see, like, this guy is after it today, right? It's not just that he is showing that he is better than everybody else. Like, this guy is hustling, right? This guy is absolutely doing everything that he can do. He has brought his A game. He is pushing it as hard as he can. He's proven something here today, right? So, and he's proven it. I'm going to let it stand. The thing that, whatever it is that he's proving, I'm going to let that stand. For me not to let that stand would be wrong, would be rude. As for me, this day, I'm going to let him have the honor, right? Notice not only the thoughtfulness of Lancelot, right? It's not just courtesy in the sense of I'm being polite, but his willingness to think about the other knight's position, right? And what might be going on and what other things that... This is Lancelot not doing the opposite of just thinking of himself or just thinking of his own honor, right? He's willing to forbear. Yeah, he could come in. Would it be an accomplishment for him? Would it be yet another feather in Lancelot's cap? To be able to say like, oh yeah, there was this knight who took down everybody on on Arthur's court that day, but then I came out and mopped the floor with him, right? Once again establishing that I'm still number one, right? Yeah, he could do that, right? But he's not going to do that. As for me, this day he shall have the honor. Lancelot is not a glory hound, right? He's not going to hog the spotlight. He's going to let the other guy have it, right? Because Lancelot he's secure, right? His worship is not in question here, right? His prowess is not in question here. He's got nothing to prove. This other guy obviously did. Let him do it, right? He's fine with that. But again, notice what he's essentially saying here, right? Again, he's the star player of his team captain, and he's like, nah, I don't want to come off the bench. I'm fine. Let's go ahead and lose today. That would really be what's fair, right? Yeah, David is wondering if Lancelot did choose to go out, wouldn't it earn him disworship and sort of disdain for defeating a knight who's already tired? I mean, essentially, David, in part, that's what he's saying, right? I mean, like, look, it's not gonna. I don't want to do that. It would certainly do him no favors. Certainly, David, if he were to go out and take that guy down and then boast about it, right? If he were to take him down and be like, and then be strutting around and bragging and throwing it in that knight's face and everything, yeah, then that would be a bad look, right? Everybody, including, of course, that knight, who in this case is Sir Gareth, would have reason to say like, oh, great, yeah, that's great, Sir Lancelot, thanks, that you really showed something there, right, by taking advantage of a tired opponent. But I don't think, David, if Arthur tells him to go out there and he goes out there and takes him down, I don't think that anyone is going to be like, oh, Lancelot is such a jerk. If he doesn't do it in a jerky way, right? But for him to demur, right? For him just to say, no, I'm going to let him win. I'm going to let him have his glory is good. Lancelot is humble, right? He is, humility is one of his virtues, right? And I know that a lot of modern readers dislike characters that are super, super good, right? Lancelot as paragon of all knightliness, I know is going to rub a lot of modern readers the wrong way, and they'll be really annoyed with him. They were much more okay with that kind of thing. All I would say is keep in mind, Lancelot is going to have issues. He is not going to be the perfect and unblemished person the whole time. So if you are interested to see this, just keep in mind, this is Malory setting that up, right? Setting up, again, it's not only that Lancelot has high standards, but that he actually succeeds in following those high standards a lot of the time, right? So that when he begins to struggle with this application of those standards in practice, it's going to mean a lot more. So just be patient is what I would say if you find Lancelot a little cloying in some ways. But David, yeah, he is kind of a medieval superhero. There's definitely a sort of an element of that. Dollarstoke says you really don't want Lancelot on your team at the Battle of Malden. He wouldn't do that in battle, right? I mean, this is just sport, right? This is just fun. There's nothing at stake here except people's worship, or maybe some quarrel, or the love of his lady, or something like that. But yeah, no. When the chips are down and mortal combat is being waged, Lancelot will not hold back. So Bruce is wondering, why has Lancelot been sitting around all day? And my answer to that is humility. Humility. I mean, Lancelot, he's not just number one. I mean, he's number one. He's not just barely number one, right? He is number one by a lot. And if he's out there, it's not sporting, you know? I mean, like, he actually does a lot of not participating in tournaments, and mostly just for the sake of, like, letting other people have a chance, right? I mean, if he, sorry, speaking of enormously talented number one people, so yeah, if he just goes out there, if he goes out there and fights his hardest in every single tournament, he's gonna win every time. He knows that. Everybody else knows that. Like, it's pretty soon the tournaments aren't even gonna happen, right? I mean, everyone's gonna be like, okay, you know, I quit, or I'm not even gonna join the side that's against Lancelot. So he's kind of like the nuclear option in tournaments at this point. He's almost just like this sort of emergency backup situation, you know, with these tournaments. And again, it's yeah, Karita, exactly. He knows he would just, it's not about proving himself anymore. There's literally nothing that he could prove by fighting in this tournament at this point. He would just be ruining the fun for everybody else and preventing anybody else from having a chance to achieve worship. So, yeah. Oh, that's harsh, Zach. Zach says, as a Blue Jays fan, there were times I wish the Red Sox would pull a Lancelot during the season. I hear you. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Red Sox weren't quite at the Sir Lancelot level this year, but it's certainly the closest I've ever seen him. Yeah. Brian, I agree that sitting out tournaments out of humility does set Lancelot apart in Malory, as Brian goes on to explain, where every knight who encounters another knight at some random country crossroads immediately has to fight to prove himself. Yeah, Lancelot doesn't do that. Now, remember, we did see some things, like, for instance, when he, in the Book of Sir Lancelot, when he dressed up in Kay's armor, that was an interesting little glimpse of kind of both ends of the thing, right? On the one hand, it showed you that if he's riding around the countryside in his own armor and everybody knows who he is, he's going to have an awfully quiet time, as Kay jokes about, right? Riding home wearing Lancelot's armor, because nobody wants to fight him. So Lancelot doesn't get many combat opportunities because who's going to attack him, right? But the other end of it is that we see that he, at least at that stage, right, in the Book of Sir Lancelot, when he is still sort of establishing the fullness of his reputation, because you'll recall that book began with him just coming home from the Roman expedition, right, when he was a new made knight. So the Book of Sir Lancelot is really showing and establishing his full reputation. In the process of doing that, even back then, he still had to do things like dress up in Kay's armor in order to get opportunities, because he was already so well known. Now he's well past that now. You know, it's been presumably, it's not clear how much time has been passing, but it seems pretty clear it's already been probably years since the beginning of the Book of Sir Lancelot at this point. And he is well established. Exactly, David. He is content with the glory that he has. So it's an interesting thing about humility, right? He's humble on the one hand, but he's not humble in the sense of not seeking any glory at all, right? He is interested in worship and in his reputation and things like that. It's not that he doesn't care about reputation, But contentment, David, I think that's more the sort of the important element of the thing. Patricia wants to know how he stays battle ready. Well, for that, Patricia, I would say keep in mind, first of all, remember this is a world in which Sir Gareth can put on armor and pick up a sword for, as far as we know, the first time in his life, and immediately be not only competent, but enormously highly skilled because of his blood, right? It's who he is, right? It just comes out. Same with Sir Tor, right? Raised in a peasant household, and the first time he puts on armor, he is great, right? And is overcoming lots of knights through his natural abilities, right? Because it's who he is, and it's coming out. So that's kind of the same thing with Lancelot. I mean, presumably he practices too, but yeah, no, he doesn't need to practice because he's Lancelot. Okay. I love how Sir Gareth is finally discovered. Now go, said King Arthur unto divers heralds, and bade him, ride about him, and aspire if ye can see what manner of knight he is. For I have spirit of many knights this day that is upon his party, and all say that they knew him not. So Arthur's desperate to find out who this guy is, right? He's asked lots of other people, like, you know, of the guys on Gareth's side, right? So who is that knight? And they're like, no idea. He just came out of nowhere, man. Really, no clue. But at the last, an herald rode nigh Sir Gareth as he could, and there he saw written about his helm in gold, saying, "This helm is Sir Gareth's of Orkney." Then the herald cried as he were wooed, and many heralds with him, "This is Sir Gareth of Orkney in the yellow armies." Oh, man. Yeah, it does kind of sound like Merlin was here, Josiah, though I am convinced that his mom wrote that on his helmet, right? Remember that when Morgause shows up at the court, she's like, I sent him with a perfectly good suit of armor. What happened to his suit of armor, right? And he did come out. Remember when he leaves the kitchen and he's going out to take the quest of the damsel, which is Lynette, of course. He does come out with this like sumptuous armor and cloth of gold and all that, right? So presumably that's the suit of armor that his mom sent with him. But anyway, so Arthur has like these like paparazzi heralds swarming around him, trying to get any clue as to who this guy is, right? It's written on his helm. Oh, Brian, that would ruin all the fun, right? If someone in Camelot invented a tournament registration list where everyone has to sign in with their name, that would never fly, right? Or rather, people will always give fake names. Like if you had to check IDs to be in the tournament, you'd never get any registrations, right? Likely a bot is wondering if reading would be a common skill among knights. I doubt it, actually. It's possible that some would be literate, but don't forget that literacy is not a super useful skill, not in a pre-printing press world. Written material is quite scarce, and it's no hardship to go through life without literacy. Knowing letters is a very specific skill. I mean, like to say that, do you know how to read would be like saying, like, do you know how to cook, or do you know how to garden, or something like that. Like, useful skills, right? Good, but you know, like you don't have to be a gourmet cook to live. You don't have to read to live. In a you know, in the modern world, in a post printing world, within a print culture, it's very difficult, right? I mean, it is an enormous handicap in the modern world not to be literate. That was not true in the Middle Ages at all. There is a very small amount of text around, and even less that has to be read by you personally, right? So yeah, it's, you know, would knights receive some, you know, sort of enough education that they would be able to read? Some of them perhaps, but again, that would be very far from common. Yeah, exactly. As Josiah says, knights are not clerks, usually. Exactly. It's clerk. It's a specialized skill, right? You know, reading and writing, who needs it? Not very many people. One thing that I would urge, and this is a mistake that so many people make, modern people. People associate illiteracy with ignorance. And especially illiteracy with, like, you can be literary without being literate in the Middle Ages. Because again, remember, it's not a print culture. You don't have access to books. If you can read or not, you probably don't have the book, right? Because books are enormously expensive and really rare. So the vast majority of literary consumption in the Middle Ages it's still largely in part an oral culture. It's not a totally oral culture, but the oral storytelling is still a really big part of things, right? So, again, just because you can't read doesn't mean you don't know literature. You are not well spoken and not well educated. Even you can be well educated without being literate, because again, actually reading things with your own eyes and forming letters with your own hand is not a big deal and not an important part of what it means to sort of function in the regular world for everybody except clerks. Heralds, Zachary, would need to be literate. That's a because they are keeping records of things. So yes, that's why Arthur is sending the heralds out. I don't know if Arthur suspected that Sir Gareth was wearing a written label or not, but yeah, but yes, clearly the heralds are literate. Yeah. Yeah, David says one of the things that surprised him most about medieval literacy was the discovery that even many priests couldn't read. Yeah, I mean, and again, David, even now, that's more sketchy, right? Priests are supposed to be literate, theoretically. Like, ideally, you want that to happen, because they are the ones who are transmitting the written record. They're supposed to be keeping many written records. There are a bunch of things that they are supposed to read, be able to read, and to be able to transmit. Again, the whole parish doesn't need to be able to read the Bible, because they'll hear, like, the preacher can tell them the stories, and the friars can tell them. They can hear this stuff, right, orally, and so it's fine, right? They don't need to be able to read it themselves. The priest kind of does, right? Again, he can get by without it, right, because he's heard the stories too. But but yeah, like parish priests, not always literate, because again, there's not a whole huge literate population to draw from, right? But an illiterate priest, I won't say it's necessarily a scandal, but it's not a good look, right? Unlike, again, an illiterate knight, no one's gonna say anything about that. That's not going to seem strange, or there's nothing sort of deviant about that. There's a little bit of deviance to an illiterate priest in that way. Yeah. So, and Matt Duke says, no wonder no one raised an eyebrow at Merlin's prophecies all over the place. Nobody could read them. Well, yeah. But again, see, that's one of the things that you one of the reasons why you want a literate priest, right, is to have like at least one person in the community who can read. So if all of a sudden people go out one day and they're like, hey, so there's this like gold writing all over this rock that's like in the middle of my wheat field, you know, like it's good to have somebody in the community that you can call in and who can read it for you. So that's super useful. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Okay. Last thing about Sir Gareth, and then we'll move on. And that's his relationship with Gawain, which is super interesting at the end. Forever after, Sir Gareth had espied Sir Gawain's conditions. He withdrew himself from his brother Sir Gawain's fellowship, for he was ever vengeable, and where he hotted, he would be avenged with murder, and that hotted Sir Gareth. Sir Gareth distances himself from his older brother, his famous older brother, Sir Gawain, on moral grounds, because Sir Gawain is vengeable, right? If he hates somebody, he will avenge his hatred with murder. And Sir Gareth hates that, right? So he is opposed to how his brother acts. He is not going to be a party to that. The moral condemnation of Gawain by Gareth is a really interesting and important moment here. Again, showing there are several different schools of knighthood, right? We've got the Sir Lancelot school, the highest sort of moral code, right? The highest attempt at moral purity in knighthood. Sir Gawain, as we've seen, is not that, right? There's a certain pragmatic knighthood that Gawain seems to be a part of, right? He's willing to do what he feels he needs to do in order to do what he feels needs to be done, right? That's what that's where, and remember we saw this with Gawain early, right? When King Pellinore was put into this, high position by Arthur, and they knew, right? Gawain and Gaheris knew that King Pellinore had killed their father, King Lot, right? Conditions, Sir Gawain's conditions, just means like when he like how he behaves, like his whole effect, right? The whole when he really understood the full Sir Gawain package. That's what he's talking about there. By the way, this kind of happened. There are a bunch of interesting and important things that happen off stage here. We'll get some references to it. Sir Gawain does in fact succeed in murdering King Pellinore. He's going to kill King Pellinore, and they're going to set on him, I think, at least 2 or 3 on 1. Remember, Gaheris was all about it, right? Gaheris, who is the second brother in that family. Agravain is the third. And then Mordred is the 5th, right? The sort of half 5th. Super sketchy 5th. But Gaheris, remember, was like, okay, this sounds great. Wait to kill King Pellinore until I become a knight, then I'll help, right? And he does, right? The 2 of them do, in fact, kill King Pellinore. And there's a bunch of other stuff that happens between those 2 families. There are some issues there. We'll get some references to it later. All right, let's move on to Sir Tristram, finally. All right, so here, let me make a few of my prefatory remarks. In bringing in the story of Sir Tristram, Malory is attempting one of the more complicated things. We've seen already, especially in those particularly rough early books, when there seemed to be like completely different versions of the story which were being combined, like most notably the 2 different stories of the acquisition of Excalibur, right? Was it the story that the sword that he pulled out of the stone, or was it given to him by the Lady of the Lake, right? We've seen evidence early on that Malory's goal is to sort of integrate all of these different Arthurian stories into this one big Arthurian legend, right? The story of Sir Tristram is one of the most difficult and awkward in many ways, I think, of those integrations. In some ways, of course, it's simpler. Again, it's not like there are a couple different versions of how Arthur got Excalibur, so I'm just going to throw them both in and call it good. In some ways, of course, it's less awkward than that. It's not like it exactly contains contradictions. When I call it awkward, what I mean primarily is that it's a very different strain. The story of Sir Tristram is technically an Arthurian story, of course, but it's in a lot of ways it was never a mainstream Arthurian story. It's always kind of like its own thing, right? The story of Tristan and Isolde is it's an independent story. To try to make it fully continuous, to fully integrate it into this world of the Arthurian court, as Malory is describing it, is challenging for Malory. And there are some moments where we'll see some rough edges. I think Malory, in general, does a pretty good job of this. One of the difficulties is we'll look at one in particular where I think we can really see the seams, right? Where he's taking this other story, which has this completely independent tradition, and he's kind of trying to paste it in to his Arthurian world. And there are definitely places where you can see the seams where he's pasted it in. But mostly the challenge, I think, is not really of that kind. By and large, I think that Malory succeeds reasonably well at that. What's interesting is that the thing that he's pasting in doesn't exactly fit in a lot of ways. What we get with Sir Tristram, in a sense, and yeah, so what let me finish that thought first. What we get from Sir Tristram, in a sense, is, I don't know, it's not quite now for something completely different, but here's a totally different model, right? Sir Tristram is not going to act like other knights. He's not Sir Lancelot, and he's not Sir Gawain. He's neither one. He doesn't have the same problems that Sir Gawain has, but he certainly doesn't have the same virtues that Lancelot has. As a result, Sir Tristram is kind of more different than most of the other knights, right? Yeah, David says it's the original crossover fiction. Kind of, yeah. He's interesting. He's interesting, but it's kind of less fun. The other thing that I will warn you about, when I first read Malory unabridged, I loved the story of Sir Lancelot, the book of Sir Lancelot. I loved the book of Sir Gareth, and so I was ready, right? I'm like, oh, now we get Tristan and Isolde, a story which I'd heard about, but I'd never really read a full version yet at that point. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to get this. So I was hoping for just like the book of Sir Gareth, these sort of self-contained. So now he's going to do the story of Tristram and Isolde, and it's going to be awesome, right? And I'm looking at the table of contents, and it's 5 times as long as the story of Sir Gareth. So I'm like, awesome, right? This is just going to be way. It's not like that. The book of Sir Tristram is a really different situation. He's going to lose the thread. And I don't think that's an accident. Again, I don't think that he just doesn't seem to want to stick with Sir Tristram all that long, really. And he gets distracted by other things. We'll see sort of how these things emerge. But just be forewarned that not only will the book of Sir Tristram not be, this sort of coherent story in the same way that Gareth was, it's also going to kind of peter out. Like, Sir Tristram's story is going to end off stage. Like, we're never even going to, it's just, we kind of lose the thread with Tristram. And then he kind of peters, Malory kind of peters out, and then he's going to be all like, okay, Holy Grail. Let's bring this back together, people. And we go off on the quest for the Holy Grail. So anyway, yeah, the book of Carita, you're certainly not the only one who would find the book of Sir Tristram not your favorite part of the book. I think that's almost universal. Like I said, the book of Sir Tristram is the most skipped part of Malory by far. But there's a lot of really good nuggets in here, which I don't want to lose. And in particular, remember one of my favorite guys, Sir Palomides, and we get our first scene with Sir Palomides tonight. Yeah. So, okay. We begin with an interesting little summary of the political situation, just to clarify things. And again, notice the fact that he feels like he needs to back up and explain this sort of shows how alien to the Arthurian situation in some ways this whole situation is. Like, now I'm going to talk about a story which happens in the court of the King of Cornwall, right? But let me explain how this actually does fit underneath the Arthurian umbrella, right? So we get the explanation of the political situation at the start. And at that time, King Arthur reigned. All right, so let's make, this is an Arthurian, like this is all under Arthur's aegis, right? And he was whole king of England, Wales, Scotland, and of many other realms. Howbeit, there were many kinges that were lordes of many countries, but all they held their londes of King Arthur. For in Wales were 12 kinges, and in the north were many kinges, and in Cornwall and in the west were 12 kinges, also in Ireland were 3 kinges, and all were under the obeisance of King Arthur. So was the king of France and the king of Bretagne, and all the lordship is unto Rome. But notice, that's all we care about. South of France, it gets kind of fuzzy, right? There's like Italy and whatever, and but anyway, and Arthur like technically ruling, but nobody really cares. Yeah, exactly, Zach. Nobody else might remember that King Arthur became the Roman emperor, but we haven't forgotten. Okay. I love how he doesn't even know for sure how many kings there were in Ireland, right? Who can keep track of things like that anyway? Okay. King Meliodas and his wife love each other very much. They're a happily married couple, which is kind of cool, right? And King Meliodas is having one of those awkward moments where this other lady loves him and he's not into her, so she kidnaps him and holds him hostage, trying to make him love her, which seems kind of low yield. But anyway, that's what's going on. And she, the wife, gets upset because the husband is missing, right? And it could be for any number of reasons, right? I mean, anything. I mean, think about it, right? It could be anything from, he's like run off and having an affair to he's captured by a necrophiliac sorceress. So really a full gamut of options here. So she, heavily pregnant, goes riding off into the forest to pursue him, right? And that's when her birth pangs come upon her and she gives birth, but she dies for lack of help, right? I'm not sure exactly the help, but I mean, but lack of help means she, with her maidservant only, she is giving birth like on the forest floor with only her maidservant there. So even in a medieval context, these are suboptimal labor and delivery circumstances, right? It's kind of like giving birth in the cab, Deborah, kind of, except she's not even on the way, right? She's going somewhere else. So this is these are her final words. When ye see my lord, King Meliodas, recommend me unto him, and tell him what pines I endure here for his love, and how I must die here for his sake, for a default of good help. And let him weet that I am full sorry to depart out of this world from him. Therefore pray him to be friend to my soul. Now let me see my little child, for whom I have had all this sorrow. And when she saw him, she sighed thus, Ah, my little son, thou hast murdered thy mother, and therefore I suppose that thou art a murderer so young, thou art full likely to be a manly man in thine age. Never been quite sure exactly of the logic there. Like, what is she saying about manly men? Anyway, is this like an anti-knighthood crack? Right? If you've killed your mother at birth, this means you're going to be a great man later on because you're just a killing machine. Obviously, is that the reasoning? Is this I'm not 100% sure I'm following her there. And because I shall die of the birth of thee, I charge my gentlewoman that she pry my lord, the King Meliodas, that when he is christened, let him call him Tristrams. That is as much to say as a sorrowful birth. And therewith the queen gaff up the ghost and died. Then the gentlewoman laid here under an umber of a great tree, and then she lapped the child as well as she micked from cold. Okay. Yeah, Tomas and Dolores Stroke are both thinking of Feanor. It's not like Feanor. No. This is one out of every 3 childbirths killed the woman. Maternal mortality rate was enormously high. This, of course, is why we get the whole evil stepmother thing. As we're going to see, we're going to get an evil... Tristram has an evil stepmother, right? Stepmothers, of course, super common in noble and royal families because there is such a high mortality rate in childbirth. So the women are dying all the time, and the men still, especially the noble and royal men who need their heirs, marry again very frequently, right, in order to make sure that their line continues. And then, but of course, the second wife, not always super happy to let the child of the other woman who died earlier be the heir who inherits, right? So this is, of course, this is where the whole evil stepmother thing comes from. James Stevens wants to know, did she really need to explain who her lord was to her servant? No, I don't think the servant would have been confused. I think it's one of those narrative things, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, okay, so David, I'm not 100% sure. But I think that, when she uses the word murder to describe what the infant Tristram has done to her, she's exaggerating. I don't think this is standard usage. I don't think that, normally a baby whose mom died in childbirth would be considered a murderer by anybody. I don't think that's a standard thing. I don't think this is a standard usage that she is employing here. I think that this is, again, a deliberate, not exaggeration isn't quite right, dramatization. She's being a little melodramatic. She's dying, so that's okay. But I think that's definitely an effect that she's going for here. Yeah. So his name means sorrowful birth, right? Sadness is associated with Tristram from the beginning. His first exploit is a very interesting one and sets an interesting tone for his entire career. And this is, of course, the wicked stepmother thing. So the wicked stepmother, who's a super incompetent wicked stepmother, who ends up killing one of her own children because her plan about how to kill Tristram is to leave out a cup of poison on the coffee table, right, where the kids are likely to drink it, hoping that it's going to be Tristram and not one of her own kids who drinks it. I mean, it's not a good plan, even, really by any standards. Um, yeah, yeah. So, anyway, yeah. So, okay, sorry. I'm now less distracted all of a sudden. Yeah. It was not a good plan, her murder plan. But what happens next, of course, is more surprising, right? Tarloniel says she should have written his name on the cup in gold letters. That might have helped. This cup is designed only for Tristram, young Tristram, to drink of it. And so she was dampened by the assent of the barons to be brent. So she receives capital punishment here, right? She's condemned because this is treason. This is murder by treason, attempted murder by treason, right? The treacherous poisoning of her stepson. That's capital offense, right? So she's going to be executed or excussed. The word excussion, I don't know. I just was giggling when looking at the word excussion. I don't know why that I found so particularly funny, but I totally did. Anyway, so she's going to get excussed, which means I guess she's in the excussion protocol here as she's preparing to be burnt. Because remember, that's how women are executed, right? And right as she was at the fire to take her excussion, this same young Tristrams kneeled before his father, King Meliodas, and again, James, we got to clarify who's his father, King Meliodas. It's just because nobody knows who King Meliodas is, so we got to make sure everyone's on the same page. And besought him to give him a done. I will well, said the king again. Then said young Tristrams, give me the life of your queen, my stepmother. That is unrichtfully asked, said the King Meliodas, for thou ought have wreaked a hat here, for she would have slain thee with poison, and for thy sake most is my cause that she should be dead. Sir, said Tristramus, as for that, I beseech you of your mercy, that ye will forgive her, and as for my part, God forgive her, and I do. And it liked so much your highness to grant me my boon, for God is love, I require you to hold your promise. Sithen it is so, sighed the king, I will that ye have her life. And sighed, I give her you, and go ye to the fire, and tak her, and do with her what ye will. So thus Sir Tristrames went to the fire, and by the commandment of the king delivered her from the death. But after that, King Meliodas would never have a do with her, as at bed and at board. But by the means of young Tristrames he made the king and her accorded. But then the king would not suffer young Tristrams to abide, but little in the court. Okay. Young Tristram does something really impressive here, right? His first exploit is an exploit of remarkable forgiveness. His stepmother has tried to execute him, to poison him rather, to murder him, and he responds by saving her life for no obvious reason. His father is legitimately confused. Like, why are you begging for her life? That doesn't make sense, Tristram. You're the one she tried to have. I'm executing her for your sake, right? As for my part, God forgive her, and I do, right? I forgive her. And I think when he says God forgive her, he's like, I pray that God would forgive her, right? He says he forgives her. He is going to intercede with God on her behalf, right? He's hoping that God is going to forgive her too. And he's asking the king, his father, that he, the king, King Meliodas, would forgive her as well. And notice that he doesn't give up there. He doesn't just save her life. He doesn't just save her life to teach her another awkward lesson, right? Or to make things more painful for her in some other way. Like, I'm not content with burning her at the stake. I want to keep her alive. And no, he continues to intercede for her, right? So when King Meliodas says, fine, okay, like I made a rash promise. So, you can have her life, but, I'm done with her. right? She's dead to me. So he's not going to have a do with her as at bed or at board. So, you know, I'm not going to sleep with her, and I'm not going to eat with her, right? So, you know, basically she's not my wife anymore. I'm going to treat her as if she's not my wife. Which is an awkward thing in many ways to do for him, right? Because of course he can't divorce her. So he's like being like, fine, well, I'm just going to have no wife. Right. Anyway, Tristram does not give up until he made them accorded. Right. They make up. So as far as I can see, King Meliodas and the formerly wicked but now penitent, I suppose, stepmom, kind of live happily ever after here, which is kind of interesting in lots of ways. King Meliodas has a sort of a fascinating little career here. And Carita, how old is he? Great question. Middle school? 13-ish? 14? Something like that. 12? Maybe? Possibly younger? Possibly as young as 10? Anyway, he's quite young. We know he's going to be very young. When he's going to be knighted at like the age of like around 16. Certainly not more than 18. And that's several years down the road. He has this whole like intermediary educational period, right? So it is quite likely that he's substantially young. David wonders if murdering the son and trying to murder the other son is grounds for divorce. No, it's grounds for execution, but I'm not sure it's grounds for divorce. Yeah, no, there aren't so many grounds for divorce. Remember, you know, Anne Boleyn. It's not so easy. Yeah, Brian, no, exactly. 16 is adult, absolutely. So that's why I'm guessing 16 is his age when he is knighted. Yeah. I think, in fact, Carita, the more I think about it, the more likely I think it is that he's younger than like 10 or maybe even 8 to 10, possibly elementary school age, not middle school age. And the reason I say that is because it seems clear that he's still sort of in the nursery, right? His training, you know, his sort of adult training that he would be having in his sort of tween and teenage years is clearly not happening yet, right? So I think he's probably younger. So yeah, if you're picturing this, Carita, picture 9-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, around there, Tristram begging for the life of his wicked stepmother, right, who tried to have him killed. So it is an intriguingly unprovoked piece of generosity and forgiveness by Tristram. So Tristram starting off on a really good foot here, right? This is very good. Now, here's the other thing, and one of those places, and I'm not saying this is bad, but one of those things where you can see this is just a different tradition. Sir Tristram is a totally different kind of hero. Malory's taking this, of course, from his sources, French sources chiefly. And so Tristramus learned to be an harper, passing all other, that there was none such called in no country. And so in harping, and on instruments of music in his youth, he applied him for to learn. And after, as he growed in might and strength, he laboured in hunting and in hawking. Never gentleman more that ever we heard read of. That's a phrase I'm really interested in. Never gentleman more than ever we heard read of. Read, of course, normally means like advice, counsel, like what is your rede, meaning like what counsel do you have for me here? That's what the word read normally means. Ever we heard read of. I don't know. Counsel or advice doesn't seem relevant here. If he didn't have the word heard, it would sound like he was just referring to the French books, like than ever we read of, like anywhere that we read in the book, because read is still also a verb that means to read, right? As well as to counsel or advise. Heard read, I don't know. Strange. But anyway, okay. Is it unusual for a knight to learn a musical instrument? Well, we have no other examples, certainly. But it's not just that he also plays the harp, which is unusual for knights. But he has a reputation for other things, right? Sir Tristram's worship is of a different sort, right? He's not just competing on the knightly leaderboard. He's also famous in totally other ways, right? Namely, hunting and hawking. Greatest hunter and hawker of the age, right? And as the book saith, he began good measures of blowing of beasties of venery, and beasties of chase, and all manner of vermines, and all the termes that we yet of hawking and hunting is called the books of Sir Tristram's. Sir Tristram literally wrote the book about hunting, right? All the vocabulary that we use as hunters in the Middle Ages, right? All the different horn calls, that's what it means with the blowing of beasts, right? Of venery and beasts of chase. It's like all the different words that we have for the different vermins, like the different animals and things that we hunt, or all these things, like all the terms about how to, and the French source is actually even more explicit about like the ways in which you butcher deer after you kill them and everything. All Tristram invented all this stuff, right? So Tristram literally wrote the book about hunting, right? Yeah, Dollarstruck, I agree. This might seem like it might seem like a strange kind of skill set, right? But it is a very knightly skill set. This is because really there are only a few things that knights do for fun, right? Remember what's work? You know, when a knight or a lord, you know, has to, you know, get dressed and go into the office, what do? Fight in battles. That's what they do, right? Their job is to fight. So for fun, what do? Fight pretend battles, namely tournaments and things, or you go about as a knight adventurous, right, in order to perform feats of arms, in order to do good things, you know, to rectify quarrels and, you know, help damsels who are sitting next to wells hoping that some knight will come along and help them. Or you hunt things, right? So you kill stuff, right? It's what you do, right? This is your job. So it's a very gentlemanly thing. And look at this next paragraph is really, I mean, goodness. Wherefore, as me seemeth, all gentlemen that beareth old armies, that is coats of arms, right? So all gentlemen, this is Malory speaking to his contemporary audience. Okay, all of you people out there from old families, listen up. All gentlemen that beareth old armies ocht of richt to honour Sir Tristram's for the goodly termes that gentlemen have and use and shall do unto the day of doom, that thereby in a manner all men of worship may discover a gentleman from a yeoman, and a yeoman from a villein. For he that gentle is will draw him to gentle tatches, and to follow the noble customs of gentlemen. Again, it's, you know, you do what you are, right? What you are, it comes out, right? You will draw him to gentle tatches. Tatches is a fun word. It means, it's like touches, but it's like a touch of a nobleman, right? A touch of Harry in the night. No, it's, you know what I always think of mutually? I always think of Jane Austen when I read this, and I always think of this when I read Jane Austen. when in Jane Austen they talk about, say that he was a man of good parts, right? That's not a crude physiological commentary. It means like, he has excellent qualities of different kinds, right? That's what I always think of with gentle touches, right? He is a gentleman is gonna have gentle parts, right? He's gonna be drawn to gentlemanly things. Yes, Devra, the gentle touches naturally coming out and him being drawn to gentle touches is exactly what we saw with Sir Tor. That's exactly it. And yes, Rachel, as me seemeth means that Malory's own opinion is being inserted here. And that's pretty unusual. We do not see Malory, the narrator, speaking in his own voice very often in this text, especially kind of interjecting like that. So, but here's my reading of this. The very fact that he does this here, Rachel, is unusual. And it seems to me an interesting coincidence, right? That he does this quite unusual sidebar, right? About what gentlemen today should think of Sir Tristram. They ought of right to honor Sir Tristram, because he invented all this stuff. So this unusual sidebar comes right after this very unusual praise of a knight. No other knight is praised this way, right? We don't get anything about the education of any of the other knights. And anything that we do get about their, again, great knights are defined thus far by not needing education, right? Like Sir Gareth and Sir Tor, right? If you're the right sort, it's just going to come out. Nobody has to teach you, right? The fact that we get stuff about Tristram's education, again, is unusual on its own. The fact that he's like literally writing books, and now is he literate or not, or is he just coming up with this stuff and somebody else wrote it down? It doesn't really matter. But he's inventing hawking and hunting terms, and he's the greatest harper in the world, like not just the greatest of all the knights. It's not just that like he's able to win the Knights of the Round Table talent contest, like non-knightly talent contest. It's not just that, right? He's the greatest harper in the entire world. There was none such called in no country, right? He's the greatest musician in the world, and invents all these. So again, this is strange. This is a strange kind of praise for a knight, and I don't know if if Malory feels self-conscious about it, if he feels the need to be like, but don't think Tristram is weird or girly or something like that. Like, just because he plays the harp and, it's like, he's not weird. In fact, we should totally be excited about Sir Tristram. In fact, we all owe a lot to Sir Tristram, right? Everybody ought to honor Sir Tristram, because this is totally a good thing. It almost sounds like him having to reassure others and himself, like, okay, I know this is sounds a little bit weird, but like, it's totally, if you think about it, it's totally a good thing, right? That's almost what that sounds like to me. I'm not really sure, but that's what it sounds like. Josiah thinks that Tristram sounds more like a Greco-Roman hero than an Arthurian knight at this point. Yeah, like I said, the story of Sir Tristram is it's a very different tradition than the other stories, like the classic Sir Gawain stories or anything like that. Okay. Then young Sir Tristram, as yet unknighted, goes to the court of King Mark of Cornwall, his uncle, remember. His mom, who died in the woods and named him Tristram, was, of course, King Mark's sister, Elizabeth. She gets a name, incidentally, right? That's kind of a big deal, actually. Anyway, sorry. Okay. In the chat room, Tomas Delgado was saying this seems very French, not British. Yeah, he's super French. Now, I mean, honestly, my favorite version of the Tristan and Isolde story is the German one, actually, by Gottfried von Eschenbach. No, not Gottfried von Strasberg. Wolfram von Eschenbach is the one who did the Parsifal story. Yeah, the German version is really cool. I quite like that. The French one is much more uneven. Well, there are a couple different French ones, but it's clearly the French ones that he's drawing from here. Notice he's educated in France. He goes down to France where he learns all this stuff, and then he comes back. Yeah, he's just different. Anyway, okay, so King Mark beheld Tristrams, and saw that he was but a young man of age, but he was passing well mad and big. Fair sir, said the king, what is your name, and where were ye born? Sir, my name is Tristrams, and in the country of Lyonesse was I born. Ye say well, said the king, and if ye will do this battle, I shall make you knicht. Therefore come I to you, said Tristrams, and for none other cause. So he arrives at the court, and he sees that the court is being challenged by this outsider whom nobody dares to face. And this outsider's challenge has been unanswered, and everybody in the court is terrified to take up the challenge of this foreigner who's out there defying them. And so the young boy, Sir Tristram, not yet Sir Tristram, Tristram comes to the court and is like, I will go fight that guy that everybody else is afraid of. Yeah, exactly. Several of you are... I warned you that we were going to get a much clearer biblical parallel later on, and this is absolutely it. This is very David and Goliath, right? This is very, or rather, this scene, of course, is very David and Saul. And I think that that's very important for a couple reasons. The primary reason that this is important is that it casts King Mark from the beginning into the role of King Saul, and gives us some pretty clear foreshadowing of the relationship between King Mark and Sir Tristram, right? So it's a really fun parallel because it accomplishes two things at the same time. One, it establishes Tristram in a very heroic role, right? Sir Tristram is like King David, who not only, is this great biblical hero, but he's one of the 9 worthies, right? So, I mean, this is a huge deal, right? But anyway, so it establishes him as a really big deal, but it also establishes King Mark in a much more sort of dubious role. Brian, I agree that. Brian is asking, are we supposed to understand that the demand of tribute from Cornwall is unjust? I don't think it explicitly says so, but it seems we're supposed to root for Cornwall to win here. Yeah, we are supposed to root for Tristram to win. Is it unjust? Is it... No, it doesn't say explicitly, but I don't think it needs to be unjust in order to be undesirable. Tristram is fighting for the honor of Cornwall here, as he's going to do on many other occasions. The fact that they don't want to get bossed around by the Irish anymore is like reason enough. And it brings up one of the awkward things. Of course, if you look at this situation, the David and Saul thing is great, right? That works really well. But there's one kind of awkward thing here, which is Goliath, right? Sir Marhault is Goliath. Now, we've met Sir Marhault, and he seemed like a really nice guy, right? He was the one who endeared us to him at the beginning by beating up Sir Gawain, right? Which was very pleasant. And then he, performed really well, and we had nothing but good things to say about Sir Marhault, right? I mean, he seems like a great guy. And he's so his standing in the Goliath role seems to be awkward in some ways, right? He's not Goliath, and he's not the only thing that he has in common with Goliath is that everybody else is afraid to fight him, not because he's giant and monstrous, but because he's a really, really good knight and a knight of Arthur's court, right? And nobody else thinks they can take him, which they probably can't, because Sir Marhault is top 10, right? So, but of course, there's more to that story. We'll come back to that in a minute. We get the fight between Tristram and Marhalt, which is fun. Here's the end of that fight. Thus they fought still together, more than half a day, and either of them were wounded passing sore, that the blood ran down freshly from them upon the ground. By then Sir Tristram is wexed more fiercer than he did, and Sir Marhalt feebled, and Sir Tristram is ever more well-winded and bigger. And with a mighty stroke he smote Sir Marhalt upon the helm such a buffet that it went through his helm, and through the coif of steel, and through the brine pan. And the sword stuck so fast in the helm and in his brine pan that Sir Tristram is pulled 3 times at his sword, or ever he might pull it out from his head. And there Sir Marhalt fell down on his knees, and the edge of his sword left in his, that is of Tristram's sword, left in his, that is Sir Marhalt's, brine pan. So he actually breaks off part of his sword in the brine pan of Sir Marhalt. And in case you're going to ask, no, Tristram's sword was not notched to begin with, and no, the splinter that is left in the brain pan of Marhalt does not work its way down towards his heart. Just to clarify this. Yeah, okay. Anyway, where were we? Brain pan, sword, right. And suddenly Sir Marhalt rose grovelling, and threw his sword and his shield from him, and so he ran to his shippes, and fled his way. And Sir Tristram had ever his shield and his sword, and when Sir Tristram saw Sir Marhalt withdraw him, he said, "Ah, Sir Knight of the Round Table, why withdrawest thou thee? Thou dost thyself and thy kin great sham, for I am but a young knight, or knew I was never praved. And rather than I should withdraw me from thee, I had rather be hewn in piecemeals. I'd rather you chopped me up into little bits." So he's kind of mocking Marhalt for running away. Now, I mean, you know, Marhalt has received a mortal wound in the brain pan, right? And now I agree, David, it does seem a little bit surprising that Marhalt, man, I kind of also thought the first time I read this, when Marhalt fell down upon his knees, I thought he was kind of a goner, right? There he is kneeling with a bit of sword sticking out of his brain. So when he rises and runs to his ships, I thought that was surprising. But Brian, yeah, it seems dishonorable to run away. At least Tristram takes it as dishonorable to run away. Could he yield and beg for mercy? Well, remember they're doing battle to the uttermost. So one of them is supposed to die. Does that mean that he couldn't beg for mercy? No, he probably could beg for mercy. But he doesn't beg for mercy. He just books it, right? This is again, hard to blame Sir Marhalt again, mortal wound and all. And he's not going to last too long. He's going to get back in his boat and head off back towards Ireland, but he's not going to make it too far, and he's about to die. Okay, so we see Tristram's prowess. He's big, right? He's well-winded. Both really great things. Both things, by the way, that are said of Sir Lancelot as well. So Sir Tristram really establishes himself in his very first battle ever. He defeats Sir Marhalt, who is top 10. So he's like, I've never even been proved before. This is my first battle. The mighty stroke that he struck into Sir Marhalt's helm and brain pan, right, is a big deal. But once again, the detail about the bit of sword breaking off. And of course, you remember how this is going to come in relevant later on. This is going to help to identify him later on. Again, it's a different kind of story. Can you feel that? Right? It's just not how this kind of story has tended to go in other cases. It's a story that's interested in different kinds of details, right? But again, he's incorporating it, right? We're going to make this work. But notice the other thing we see about Tristram. Kind of brash, right? Not showing the same kind of modesty that Lancelot shows. He's expressing surprise, perhaps, right? But that whole, rather than I should withdraw me from thee, I had rather be hewn piecemeal, right? Is kind of taunting, right? Kind of rubbing it in to the guy who, out of whose brain pan he just pulled most of his sword, right? And that's I don't want to be too harsh on Tristram here, but it's got to make you kind of wonder, right? It's just got to make you kind of wonder about his character a little bit, right? Especially given the very positive example from Lancelot that we just got. Back to the Goliath thing. Tristram is wounded. Remember, in the very first jousting pass that they take, he gets wounded in the chest. And it's that first wound that he took, which is proving the serious problem. So Sir Tristram lie there a month and more, and ever he was like to die of the stroke that Sir Marhault smote him fierce with the spear. For as the French book saith, the spearhead was envenomed, that Sir Tristram should not be whole. Than was King Mark and all his barones passing heavy, for they deemed none other but that Sir Tristram should not recover. Than the king let send for all manner of leeches and surgeons, both unto men and women. Which is interesting, right? Male surgeons and female surgeons alike, right? This was an equal opportunity medical search that was conducted, and there was none that wold behold him the life. Then come there a laddie that was a witty laddie, and she by the way, that's gotta be a Twitter profile description somewhere, right? A laddie that was a witty laddie? Come on now. Okay, and she sighed plainly unto the King Mark, and to Sir Tristram, and to all his barones, that he should never be whole, but if that Sir Tristram went into the same country that the venom come fro, and in that country should he be holpen, other else never. Thus said the laddie unto the king. So when the king understood it, he let purvey for Sir Tristram a fair vessel and well vitiled, and therein was put Sir Tristram and Gawain with him, his faithful manservant. I love that. Again, nobody else gets a named manservant. Who else has a named manservant, right? I mean, who's Lancelot's, manservant? We don't know, right? But Gawain is a major character. He's a major supporting actor in the French Tristram story. So we've got to bring Gawain in here. And Sir Tristram took his harp with him, of course. And so he was put into the sea to sail into Ireland. Okay, he's got to go to Ireland because he can only be healed in Ireland because it's an Irish poison. Yeah. And David Urbach, you are exactly right about, David points out that even Gareth's dwarf doesn't have a name. Exactly. David Urbach has exactly hit upon the problem here. And this, I mentioned like places where you can still kind of see the seams where, Malory is trying to paste the Sir Tristram story into his Arthurian world. This is the biggest one to me. No, David, it doesn't make a lick of sense that the Sir Marhault, Knight of the Round Table that we know, would poison his spear. Sir Marhault would never do that, right? That would be a huge, very huge black mark on his reputation. That's treachery, right? It's treason. He would be guilty of treason if he did that. He would be a traitor knight. That's Sir Marhault. That's not the Sir Marhault we know, right? So why? Why? Well, again, one way of answering that question is you look at the sources. The fact that Tristram comes and fights for to release Cornwall from the truage to Ireland is part of the original story. That Tristram takes a wound which turns out to be poisoned and can only be healed in Ireland is part of the original story, and that's how he meets La Belle Isolde. So we need to keep Tristram poisoned, and we need to get him over, because we need to get him to Ireland, right? And we need to have him cured by La Belle Isolde so that they can meet and start their thing. So Malory keeps all that stuff. But of course, here's the difference. In the French story, the dude in the Goliath position, the one who comes and defies the King of Cornwall and demands the truage and whom Tristram fights, is a giant, in fact. He's a monster. He's a hideous giant whom everybody is terrified of. And it's no shock that his weapon is poisoned, because he's a treacherous, monstrous, baby-eating creature, right? Not quite as bad. I mean, I say baby-eating, of course, to recall the horrifying baby-eating giant of Mont Saint-Michel, but it's I mean, not the same guy, but like, you know, distant cousin of the Mont Saint-Michel giant. Like, it's that kind of giant, right? So we have this monstrous figure who does the poisoning, right? And he's like the thug who enforces the will of the King of Ireland, right? So, okay. So we still have the Irish as the Philistines. But the Goliath thing, again, in the original text, the Goliath thing works much better. We've got a really good Goliath. We've got a perfect Saul. And we've got a king. We've got a David, right? So all three of them work out super well in the original story. Malory makes his change, right? He wants to keep it knightly. He doesn't. Now, notice he's not anti-giant on principle. Giant of Mont Saint-Michel, right? We've done that already. So it's in this sense almost curious that he decides to go against the giant route. He decides not to go the giant route here, right? He's going to bring in now. In part, I think this seems to be the imposition of continuity. He's retconning here. Malory is retconning the Tristram story. In the Tristram story, in the French Tristram stories, Ireland is a black box, right? I mean, who knows anything about Ireland, right? We don't even know how many kings there are in Ireland, right? So in the French stories of Tristram, you know, when there's like something over in Ireland, it's like it might as well be in, you know, it might as well be in Japan, Takako, right? I mean, it's like some island, it's way out over there where people are strange and it's different and it's far away and it's alien and remote from us, right? So he goes over to the exotic land of Ireland and there he meets La Belle Isolde, right? So that in the French story, that's kind of how it works. But Malory, he's already got Irish knights, right? We had one son of the King of Ireland already killed. And remember, King Mark showed up soon afterwards, back in the story of Sir Balin, right? And then, of course, we get another, Marhalt, of course, as we know, he's like the Irish guy. So Malory seems to be kind of feeling himself stuck, essentially. David, I don't know of any earlier precedent for Marhalt having this role. I think that this seems to be, as far as I know, this is a Malory choice, right? And so, you know, why Marhalt? Why pick a known knight of the Round Table as opposed to coming up with a new treacherous knight? My primary answer to that is retcon, like retroactive consistency. If the King of Ireland, because see, here's the other thing. The King of Ireland, when we meet King Anguishans of Ireland, he turns out to be kind of a stand-up guy, actually, right? He's not a villain. We don't want the King of Ireland. Malory doesn't want the King of Ireland to be this monstrous villain of a strange, far-away island. He's part of the Arthurian realm, right? We meet him on other occasions. We've already seen one of his sons get killed by Sir Balin, right? I mean, he's part of the world. And Sir Marhalt is his son. And Sir Marhalt is the greatest. He's the highest ranking of all of the Irish knights. So there is no question that if this situation arises, right, that is, the truage is overdue, that, you know, the tribute that Cornwall owes to Ireland for whatever reason, we don't really know, is overdue by 7 years. What's he going to do? Since, you know, he's since he, that is King Anguishans, is a stand-up guy, right? What's he going to do? He's going to send a champion, right? And he's going to send the best he's got, which is Sir Marhault. We know this, right? So if he sent somebody else other than Sir Marhault within the world within Malory's Arthurian world, it would be weird. Like, why would he do that? I don't, like, there would be no excuse for him. If he sent, if he, Malory, did invent some other legitimately wicked poison-using knight, then that makes King Anguishans a bad guy. I mean, you just can't get around it, right? I mean, if he's going to hire some underhanded, treasonous thug to go and demand the truage, then there's no defense for him. King Anguishans, I mean, right? So Malory seems to be kind of stuck, I guess, right? I would say. And so he makes this kind of controversial decision. And in the end, Malory seems to handle it in a kind of a Malory sort of way, right? On the one hand, he does his retcon thing. Okay, so Ireland is not an unknown island. It's part of the world, right, that we've been building here. We know, what would King Anguishans do? He would send Marhault. That's a no-brainer, right? Okay, but we still need Tristram to be poisoned. So what are we going to make up a story of how Sir Marhault, like, as Tarwaniel suggests, fell to the dark side, right? Has, like, converted and become a Sith Lord and now uses a poisoned lance? No, we're not going to do that, because I think Malory likes Marhault too. So he doesn't want that. So what does he do? Just leaves an inconsistency. No problem. Notice how the text doesn't make any big deal of this at all. Nobody in the text asks the question, why would Sir Marhault poison his spear? Right? This is an absent question in the text. We might care about this. The text does not seem to care about this. This seems to be the one question that, like, Malory just kind of wants us not to ask, I think. Because again, we've seen him before, willing to, like, Excalibur, remember, right? He's willing just to leave inconsistencies. So it's just like, roll with it, people, right? Just roll with it. So yeah, there's, and Josiah, yes, good. There's another positive reason for Malory to have a Knight of the Round Table be the one who's coming to demand the truage, and that is it puts King Mark in the position of not being able to ask any other Knight of the Round Table to fight as his champion, because none of them will do it. None of them will fight with Marhault, right? So he needs to find a champion. So it puts King Mark in a tighter position too, right? Yeah, it does. And so Sir Tristram ends up coming in and being like the magic bullet, right? The one who can overcome Sir Marhault, but who's not, not already affiliated with the Round Table. And it's going to be a while before Tristram's a Knight of the Round Table. It's not going to happen automatically. Yeah. Okay. So work with it. We're in Ireland, and he needs help. He can only be, because of course you can only be cured in Ireland from an Irish poison. This is a thing, and this is not just like, this poison is only known in Ireland, so only the Irish have the antidote for it. This is a kind of a bigger thing than that. Remember that the necrophiliac sorceress used this technique too, right? Remember the bait that the necrophiliac sorceress was using for Lancelot was the corpse of the knight who injured another knight, because only by the sword and the blood of the knight who killed him could he be healed. So there was an enchanted wound in Knight A, right? And the only way that enchantment could be broken and his wound healed was if it was searched with the blood of the knight who wounded him. Right. So this is kind of this is a thing, right? But it's a magical thing. It's not an herb lore thing. It's not a physic thing. It's a magic thing. Right. is sort of, so you remember, like, talk about, you know, something that will make modern doctors cringe, right? Remember what Lancelot does is takes a piece of cloth and dips it in the blood of the long dead knight, and then takes that bloody cloth and searches the, like, rubs it in the open wounds of the other knight in order to heal him, right? And it's like, don't put on your modern medical hat when you're reading that scene, right? It's just that works, and he's healed, right? That's what happens, right? Just roll with it. Just roll with it. So anyway, that's the sense in which we're here in Ireland. That's why we're here in Ireland. Okay. Thon the king, for a great favour, made Tramtrist. So he disguises his name, right? My name is Sir Tramtrist, right? Because they'll never pick that up. Thon the king, for great favour, made Tramtrist to be put in his doctor's award and keeping, because she was a noble surgeon. And when she had searched him, she found in the bottom of his wound that therein was poison, and so she healed him in a while. And therefore Sir Tramtrist kissed great love to La Belle Isoud, for she was at that time the fairest laddie and maiden of the world. And there Tramtrist learned her to harp, and she began to have a great fantasy unto him. So, like, okay. So we have, like, how many adolescent fantasies can we fulfill in one shot? Right. First we have the wounded knight and his nurse, right? She nurses him back to health and he falls in love with her. And then immediately, right, we have, he's the harp teacher, right? The young girl's harp teacher, whom she falls in love with. So it's like, okay. It's like, I don't know, this, like, amorous role-playing fantasy in two directions at the same time, which is kind of mind-blowing. But anyway, yeah. And I'm done talking about that. But so again, notice another small. Did you notice, by the way, the continuity issue in that paragraph? Anybody spot the continuity problem? Which, again, Malory just runs smack into and can't get around. What's our continuity problem? It's not that Malory doesn't make an attempt. He gets around it, but only on the barest technicality. Sakaya, you've got it. La Belle Isoud, for she was at that time the fairest laddie and maiden of the world. Exactly. Yeah, Devra, Guinevere is the fairest lady of the world, right? That's not up for debate. That's a clearly established canonical fact. But of course, in the Tristram and Isolde world, which is a totally different world, La Belle Isoud is who's called La Belle Isoud all the time, right? The beautiful Isolde. Her first name is the Beautiful, right? So you know she's really pretty. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. So we have two number ones, right? So how he gets around it, notice I mean, this is cunning, right? He kind of lawyers his way out of this problem. Tarlonio has it exactly. The fairest laddie and maiden of the world. Ah, she's the fairest maiden of the world. Because we can technically put her in a different category from Guinevere, we can still make that statement. Because Guinevere's not a maiden anymore. She's married, right? So it's all good, right? So, okay, so we can have two number ones because they're number ones in slightly different categories. It's like being the champion of the world in two different weight classes, right? It's kind of like that in a way, sort of. Of course, that dodge is only going to work for so long where La Belle Isoud is concerned, but there it is. Okay. Yes, Kai was interested of his at the use of his word fantasy. She began to have a great fantasy unto him. Not in the sense in which I was talking about fantasies being enacted here. She began to have notions, right? She began to imagine things about herself and Tramtrist, right? Yeah. And at that time, Sir Palomides the Saracen drew unto La Belle Isoud and proffered her many giftes, for he loved her passingly well. All that espied Tramtrist, and full well he knew Sir Palomides for a noble knecht and a michty man. And wit you well, Sir Tramtrist had great despite at Sir Palomides, for La Belle Isoud told Tramtrist that Palomides was in will to be christened for Hirsak. Thus was there great envy betwixt Tramtrist and Sir Palomides. Okay, so Tramtrist gets his antagonist, right? Sir Palomides loves La Belle Isoud, and he is proffering her many gifts because he loves her passing well. And yes, Palomides is still actually a Muslim here, right? He is a Saracen. He is the Muslim knight, and he is not yet a Christian. The implication here, he is offering to be christened for her sake so that he could marry her, because he would not be able to marry her without becoming a Christian first, right? So his offer to be christened for her sake is kind of a big deal and is tantamount to a marriage proposal. At least it's is. So here's Palomides, who falls in love with La Belle Isoud because she's the most beautiful maiden in the world. And he is totally ready to make an honest woman of her, right? You know, he's going about this. He's got pure intentions. He's offering gifts. He's playing nice. He's a well-proven knight of prowess. Remember, he's number 4. When Sir Person de Vin gave us the leaderboard at that time, he cited Sir Palomides, or possibly Sir Palomides' brother, Sir Saphir, as number 4. Right there, right up there. He's top 5 in the world, Sir Palomides. Right? And Tristram respects him for a noble knecht and a michty man. But the two of them have great envy betwixt each other. Now, envy's a bad word. Envy is a big deal. That's one of the 7 deadlies. Envy's a problem. There's no getting around that. I mean, it's not to say that, you know, like anybody who envies anybody is obviously a horrible, horrible person. Like, it's a natural failing, right, to envy someone else, or to envy something. But it's shaky. It's shaky. Sir Tristram is on shaky moral ground here from the beginning. Right now, they're just rivals, right? Both of them rivals for the very beautiful and unmarried maiden daughter of the King of Ireland. All legit so far. But one of them is a Saracen who is wooing her from a polite distance, and the other is her harp teacher, right? Oh, dear me. And when Sir Palomides had received his... So they're having the tournament, right? They meet each other in the tournament over there in Ireland, and Sir Palomides is doing great. Sir Palomides, he's like winning the entire day. He goes and he beats person after person after person, right? And then Sir Tramtrist comes in and knocks him down, right? Kind of like Sir Lancelot didn't, right? And when Sir Palomides had received his fall, weet ye well he was sore ashamed, and as privily as he meeked, he withdrew him out of the field. all that espied Sir Tramtrist, and leetly he rode after Sir Palomides, and overtook him, and bade him turn, for better he wold assay him or ever he departed. Fan Sir Palomides turned him, and either lashed at other with their sweardes. But at the first stroke, Sir Tristram smote down Sir Palomides, and gaf him such a stroke upon the head that he fell to the earth. And so then Sir Tristram's bade him yield him, and do his commandment, other else he would slay him. When Sir Palomides beheld his countenance, he drad his buffets, so that he granted all his askings. Well, said Sir Tramtrist, this shall be your charge. First, upon pine of your life, that ye forsack my laddie, La Belle Isoud, and in no manner of wise that ye draw no more to her. Also, this 12 month and a day, that ye bear none armes, nother none harness of wear. Now promise me this, other here thou shalt die. Alas, said Sir Palomides, for ever I am shamed. Then he swore as Sir Tristram had commanded him. So for despite and anger, Sir Palomides cut off his harness and threw them away. Cutting up your plate mail, that is, he's like severing, like cutting the straps and everything. Then he chucks away the pieces of the plate mail. That's kind of a big deal, right? Okay, this is going to be our last slide. So it's just a few comments here. It is very hard not to think of that passage from Sir Lancelot that we were discussing at the beginning of class, right? It's not that Sir Tristram does everything wrong here, but notice we see enacted here exactly what Lancelot was saying he wanted to avoid. First, we have Sir Tristram who comes in and overcomes Sir Palomides when he seemed to be doing so well, right? He was having a really good day. Now, he hadn't totally won. He wasn't quite as high up as Sir Gareth was that day, right? But he was definitely going to win, right? And then Tristram comes and knocks him off his horse. And okay, like it's not, again, it's not exactly like the Lancelot and Gareth situation. It's not Gareth, Tristram hasn't been sitting out all day. It's not unfair. But we see a kind of an echo of it. But then more importantly, remember the reasons that Lancelot gave, why he's worried, like the consequences that he wants to make sure don't happen, right? If he intervenes. And that is chiefly, what if this guy, whoever he is trying to prove something in a quarrel or is trying to please his lady, right? Because he's trying really hard. Sir Tramtrist doesn't, Tristram doesn't just deprive Sir Palomides of his worship, right? He embarrasses him in front of La Belle Isoud, which of course Tristram is happy to do because he's his rival, right? And then he chases after Sir Palomides, leaves, right? Like he's feeling shame and frustration, and he just leaves. Which I think is not a good look for Palomides either at that point. Tristram follows him. He won't let him go. And he says he wants to better assay him. He wants to measure himself against him more fully, right? Let's fight with swords. Having fought, having taken a pass with lances where I pretty much mopped the floor with you, Sir Palomides, let's try swords. And Palomides is game. This is private now. Remember, they've run off, so they're not in the public eye anymore. And either lash it at other with their sweardes. And it sounds like we're going to have one of these, foining and trassing and traversing. But no, they don't even get to be like two bores or anything like that. Palomides starts with the lashing with the swords, but at the first stroke, Sir Tristram smites him down, right? It's totally unequal between the two of them, right? Sir Tristram just humiliates him again. Then he threatens to kill him and exacts the promise. 2 promises. 1, forsake La Belle Isoud. Give it up. Stop pursuing the lady that you love. That's hard. That's hard. And Don't bear arms or harness of war for a year and a day. That's also hard. These are stiff penalties. These are significant demands. Are they monstrously horrible demands? No, but Michelle, your question is a very good one. You know, is this stuff, is it going a bit too far? It is I don't know if it's too far, but it's quite far. Again, remember Sir Lancelot's attitude, not just the things that he said, but his attitude, right? Oh, let him have his worship, right? There's plenty of worship to share. Lancelot's reputation is going to be diminished by what he does. Remember that the envy was mutual between Palomides and Tristram. That Tristram says, I will kill you if you don't give up on Isolde. Now that's hard, but again, under the circumstances, you could translate that as Tristram saying, this is you losing, right? We fought for Isolde and I won, so take it like a man, right? That would be one way to translate what Tristram is saying. The second thing, however, don't bear harness of war for a year and a day. That's him. That's humiliation, right? That is him, because Palomides is going to have to explain that. He's not just depriving him of worship in the sense that he took him out on this day, right? That he beat him and everybody knows that he beat him in public, but that he is going to make it impossible for Palomides to do anything to recuperate his reputation for an entire year. That seems a little much. Again, I think he's being harsh with Palomides here. Besides which, there's no reason for him to kill him anyway, right? Why should he be saying, now promise me this, other here thou shalt die? Why should he die at all here, right? This is a friendly tournament, wasn't it? So, I really, this doesn't seem to me a really good move by Tristram here. Again, notice he's not being awful, right? He's not a wicked knight. He's not murdering anybody. He's, but it's hard to get fully behind him. The rivalry is real, right? It's a situation that you can kind of get behind. You can imagine how he would feel this way, right? Having defeated his rival, wanting to rub his rival's nose in the dirt, right? Wanting to make sure that his rival packs himself out of town and doesn't come back. I think we could all relate to those impulses, but they don't look great when they're acted out, right? It's uncomfortable. Watching Sir Tristram here, I find distinctly uncomfortable. Yeah, Stephen, there is a huge gap between not evil and actively good, and Sir Tristram is definitely occupying that moral space here, isn't he? Okay, well, soon after this, of course, Tramtrist's devious disguise is going to be pierced when his mother-in-law takes the bit of sword that she drew out of her son's brain pan and kept, and does her forensic thing with his sword, and finds that it fits in his sword, and realizes that her son is the murderer. It's like, CSI Ireland, and he is convicted of being the knight who killed Sir Marhault, and we'll see what comes of that. Anyway, we'll pick up with the adventures of Sir Tristram when things start to get even sketchier in Sir Tristram's life. And maybe we'll even get so far as the really awkward wedding with King Mark. And we'll certainly get to the beginning of the unpleasantness between Tristram and King Mark. So this, of course, will all happen next week. I'll let you guys go. This will all happen next week, assuming the World Series doesn't go to 7 games. Excellent. See, Brian, I was very careful. There were a couple times I almost made comments, but I didn't say anything. Glad you're still ignorant of what happened in the baseball game, Brian. Again, totally relate to that. I've been there many times. All right. Oh, yeah, sorry. Catriona, you're right. Marholt was her brother, not her son. Thank you for that correction. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I will see you guys probably next week. See some of you in LA this weekend, which I'm really excited about. But sooner or later, we shall return to the story of Sir Tristram. Thanks, everybody. Good night. The Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.